It is an opportunity to discuss the relation of art and heritage to how our cities change and expand. Cairo Art Summit is a 3-day international gathering of scholars, curators, architects, urban developers, writers, and people who specialize across the fields of art, heritage, and urban development. It's a place that leaves room for dissonance and room for different kinds of ideas. It's a place where you could have an architect speaking with a heritage activist together with a real estate developer and thinking together about the cities that we live in and the cities that we care about.
I was here today as part of the panels, specifically the one that talks about performance and community practice, because a big part of my practice in dance is community work, in the sense of I facilitate workshops.
Heritage is a central conversation at Cairo Art Summit, mainly because a lot of the people that came together to have these talks in Cairo come from fields that intersect with heritage or urban heritage, urban development. And I feel moving forward for the next editions, it will remain as a central topic to discuss together.
So my practice does not tie directly into heritage, but what I can say is when you deal with people's bodies and the way they move, that is inevitably the heritage comes in, because the way that I run these workshops is that I don't give technique or specific movements that they should follow. What I usually do is I give guides, or I give ideas, or we try to make a story together, and by default people's bodies moves in a way that they know. And so if we say, for example, in dance, belly dance or Egyptian dance is part of the heritage, that ultimately always appears in some sense.
So I was just speaking about the art scene in Egypt in the 90s and the early 2000s, and how it was that artists came to understand themselves as doing art in a really shifting society that was becoming increasingly globalized, and where there was an emergence of a private art market and global interest in contemporary Egyptian art. But at the same time, the main player in creating that art scene that became really interesting to foreign curators was the Egyptian government itself and the Egyptian Ministry of Culture, who came to support contemporary art, particularly young contemporary art, in the 1990s for a variety of reasons, but one main one was to sort of create an image of Egypt as a liberal country that has great artists doing great work, and it's, safe for investment, safe for people to come, and forward thinking.
Cultural programming is all about finding tools and ways to engage the community with heritage and culture. So we find different ways to do that, different formats, different modalities to target our core audiences. So the panel today was about institutions and heritage and cultural programming. For example, we talked about some really interesting topics like accessibility, ways of engaging audiences, how to integrate contemporary programming at heritage sites. My fellow panelist was also super interesting. She was representing Al-Ola, and it was just a very nice, intimate, cozy setting.
One of the highlights today for me was having someone like Dr. Wahbi, who is a public policy and political science professor, talk with us about the importance of policy in shaping the cultural sector that we work in. Another highlight was to have people meet for the first time from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from Qatar, Iraq, and Lebanon, among many countries represented at Cairo Art Summit, to discuss the shared questions, but also the shared concerns across the region.
I'm very interested in currently starting a research, but I need it to be funded, so we'll see. But I am, because I've been studying Chinese medicine and I have some experience in martial arts, and they tie together certain movements, work on healing and working on the mind and the body, and I found very interesting structural similarities between the type of martial arts that is related to health and between belly dance, because they're very dependent on the spine and hip movements. And so what I've actually been interested in is layering these two knowledge together and maybe find a way that a belly dance can be seen as something that can be used for health.
Or the conversations being had today were all important because of the variety of people who were in the room, who were attending, giving talks and listening to the talks and engaging in the dialogue. There was a big variety of people from Egypt and from the region, all either involved in cultural production, artistic production, practitioners, artists, designers. So it was just a wonderful blend of people who really care about culture, about its preservation, about how to present it, about how to create a sense of continuity and engagement with culture and the arts in general.
My main concern, and I feel it drives a lot of what I do, is the lack of archival practices and dedicated documentation centers for contemporary, well, not even just contemporary, also for modern heritage. I feel in a place like Egypt, where it's very dense and rich in history, one could ignore heritage of the past 150 years. It takes a lot of work to convince someone that a building that was built 1920 and it's an Art Deco or an Art Nouveau style is as important as a relic from the Fatimid period or the Pharaonic era. That I feel that's the hardest thing and the biggest challenge, to define what heritage means. And this is a conversation that we came in and out of it multiple times today, including with Dr. Farida Ma'ar from the Zamalek Association for Development, on trying to find a common ground to define what heritage means in order for us to be able to develop a way forward and think of a policy framework through which we can advance these conversations. I mean, I was happy that Ashraf Gharib today spoke about film heritage and how the beginning of cinema in Egypt was not in a building built for cinema, but was in an auction hall in Alexandria, and then in a hammam in Cairo, and then at a cafe. And when you look at it and you look at the improvised cultural centers that we set up in Egypt, when you look at the fact that we are hosting a conference inside a heritage villa that now is a co-working space, Villa M by Marrakech, where we are. It's interesting, it's poetic that 100-something years ago, this is how cinema started in Egypt, and now we continue to improvise spaces to create the possibility of an encounter to think of the future of our practice.
So I did my research in this time in the 90s and early 2000s, basically doing research with artists in Egypt, artists, curators, art writers, collectors, living and working with them for about 3 years to really understand their perspective of what they're doing first, and then trying to bring an analytic lens to it afterwards. So it's less a study of the art itself and more a study of the artists and their struggles. And it was just something that was really concerning to me because, you know, Egyptian artists are sort of like heirs to this ancient tradition. The world, when they think of Egyptian art, they think of ancient Egyptian art. They don't think of contemporary art. And so these artists were trying to like kind of battle that, but also trying to do art that to them felt authentically Egyptian. So how do they manage that also at a time with increasing like globalization and economic opening?
So for the past 1 year, I've been holding these culture salons in a very old school Paris or Garden City Cairo salons. And we call them the Garden City Salons, where they're happening at my place. And at first we were developing it with a fellow artist, Omar Hussein is a visual artist and a designer. And the idea was, can we have these conversations that we feel are urgent, but in the household setting, in a domestic setting? In order to bypass the long process that is needed to secure a venue and raise funds. And I'm like, yeah, can we go back to this moment where people would gather over something to eat and something to drink and talk about issues that they care about, or present a book that hasn't been published yet, or show a copy of a film before the final cut. And after a year of doing this, I felt that these conversations need to make it to the public, hence Cairo Art Summit. And I was very lucky that I have many incredible friends who believed in it from the get-go and were willing to be present in Cairo and lead these conversations.